Hey there, Bible nerds! Welcome to Chapters and Chuckles by Kaye, where we dive into the Bible chapter by chapter. So, yeah, I got myself a soundboard. It's just a little one, cheap from Amazon. And then I also got me a headphone, which I'm probably going to use only for the opening music thing just to make sure it works. Also got myself a new mic, but yeah, so these are something new. Anyway, let's get started. So this is episode 8 of our journey through Genesis, and we have a story-packed episode for you today. We're covering Genesis chapters 36 through 40. We're almost done. After this, we have 10 more 2 more episodes after this, and we will be done with this season, first season Genesis. And then after that, we'll be covering the book of Exodus. Anyways, so last episode, we wrapped up Jacob's turbulent tale. And then now we will be talking about Joseph's tale. But before that, we will be talking about Esau's family, his genealogy for a little bit. Just a quick one. I'll try to make it kind of fun, because I know usually people tend to skip the part where we cover the genealogy, all the names and all that. So we'll try to make it quick. So grab your favorite drink, maybe tea or coffee. Today I have water, which I'm almost done with it. I don't know if this is gonna be enough until I finish this recording. But anyways, grab your drink, get cozy, and let's jump into the story. So chapter 36, Esau's family, the birth of Edom. Our episode opens not with Jacob's clan, as I've said, but with we're gonna go over Esau's family tree first. If you remember Esau, Jacob's older twin brother, the one who sold his birthright for stew and later made peace with Jacob. So chapter 26 gives us these are the descendants of Esau, which is Edom. So it might feel like reading an ancient phone book, but hang in there. It's part of the story. We have to cover it. Esau had moved out of Canaan and settled in the hill country of Seir, and this chapter explains why. By this point, Esau had a lot of family and possessions. In fact, he and Jacob had so much livestock and property that the land couldn't support them living together. So Esau packed up his household and relocated some distance away from Jacob. This move to Seir is important because it's how Esau became the founder of the nation of Edom. And in case you forgot, Edom is Esau. Esau is Edom. That's his nickname, Edom. Now, about Esau's family, he had married Canaanite women, and if you remember, Rebecca didn't like those Canaanite women, but their names are Ada, Oholibamah, and Basima, who was actually Israel's daughter. Basima is. Each of these wives bore Esau's sons, and probably daughters too, which, they never mention. So, for example, Ada's son was Eliphaz, Basima's son was Ruel, and Oholibamah's, she had 3 sons, Jeush, Halam, and Korah. These sons and their sons after them became chieftains or clan leaders in Edom. We get a list of clan names after Esau's grandsons, with some of them with formidable names like Teman, Kenaz, and Korah. One notable grandson is Amalek, born to Eliphaz by a concubine, Timnah. Amalek would later become the ancestor of the Amalekites, a persistent adversary of Israel in the Bible, but we'll just file that away for later. So the chapter also lists the kings of Edom who ruled before any king reigned over the Israelites. That's a cool historical note. Edom had its own line of kings long before Israel crowned Saul or David. Names like Bela, Hobab, Hadad, and others are mentioned as early Edomite kings, each ruling city-state in Edom. It's like a fast forward through several generations of Edomite leadership in just a few verses. By the end of this chapter, we're left with a clearer picture. Esau's family indeed grew into a nation just as God had promised. Remember, God told Rebekah she had 2 nations in her womb. Esau might not be the chosen line in the covenant, but he's anything but forgotten. His descendants became the nation of Edom, living in their own territory with their own chiefs and kings. So, at first glance, a genealogy can seem dry, right? But it carried a subtle message. God's promises are unfolding for all of Abraham's family. Esau was the child of promise, like Jacob, yet God blessed him with family, land, and even kings. Chapter 36 highlights the fulfillment of God's word that Abraham would be the father of many nations. It's also a reminder that even those outside the spotlight of the main story, like Esau's line, have their place in God's plan. In our lives, it's a cue that God's care extends beyond the main characters. No one is forgotten. So, now let's do our fun fact corner. The name Edom means red. It was Esau's nickname. He was born red and famously traded his birthright for bread stew, if you remember from last episode. The nation of Edom inherited this name. Also, one Edomite name that stands out is Timnah. She was the sister of a Horite chief and later a concubine to Esau's son Eliphaz, making her the mother of Amalek. So the Amalekites would become foes of Israel, showing how these family lines later intersect in big ways. And that is it for chapter 36. Alright, chapter 37, Joseph's Dreams and Brother Schemes. After the genealogical interlude, chapter 37 launches us into one of the most famous biblical sagas, the story of Joseph. Cue the theme music. Actually, I'll have to figure that out later because I don't have a lot of options here on my soundboard. But imagine, because this is where the drama really begins. The scene opens with 17-year-old Joseph shepherding the flocks with his brothers. Right away, we pick up on family tensions. Joseph is out helping his half-brothers, the son of Bilhah and Zilpah. And he brings a bad report about them to their father, Jacob. In plain terms, Joseph tattled on his brother's poor behavior. You can imagine how well that went over with the older brothers. To make matters worse, Jacob, Israel, openly favors Joseph because Joseph is the son of his beloved Rachel, born in Jacob's old age. Jacob dotes on him and even gives Jacob a special robe. You might know this as the coat of many colors. The Bible calls it the ornamental robe. Whatever it looked like, it screamed favorite child. When Joseph strutted around in his fancy robe, his brothers seethed with jealousy. The Bible says this, says they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him because of their father's favoritism. This family is a powder keg of resentment at this point. Then Joseph, perhaps a bit naive or just full of teenage bravado, he was a kid, shares two dreams he's had, and these aren't your average dreams. In the first dream, Joseph and his brothers were binding sheaves of grain in the field. Then suddenly, Joseph's sheaf rose up, and all his brothers' sheaves bowed down to it. You can almost hear 17-year-old Joseph excitedly saying, "Guys, listen to this dream. I had. My bundle of wheat stood up, and all of yours bowed to mine." Something like that. And then the brothers are already fuming at Joseph's status, him being a favorite. So they respond with heavy sarcasm, saying, "So you think you're going to be the king over us," or something. They interpreted the dream as Joseph putting himself above them, and it only fuels their hatred further. In the second dream, Joseph saw the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowing down to him. This time, he even tells it to his father Jacob as well as his brothers. Jacob gives Joseph a stern rebuke, saying, "What kind of dream is that? Are your mother, your brothers, and I all supposed to bow to you someday?" So, nevertheless, Jacob doesn't dismiss it entirely. The text notes that Jacob kept the matter in hand, perhaps wondering if there was something to these bizarre dreams. The brothers, however, are now beyond upset. Jealousy has taken root. Soon after, the drama moves from dreams to real life. Joseph's brothers are out grazing the family's flocks near Shechem, and Jacob sends Joseph from their home in Hebron to go check on them. Perhaps not the wisest assignment given the circumstances. When Joseph finally finds his brother near a place called Dothan, the brothers see him approaching from a distance, likely because that special coat gave him away, colorful, and they decide to take matters into their own hands. They snarl, "Here comes this dreamer, let's kill him," and throw him into a pit, and say a wild animal ate him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. It's a very chilling moment. They're literally plotting murder, fueled by years of resentment. But he's young. He's so much younger than all of them too. Anyways, Reuben, the eldest brother, isn't on board with outright killing Joseph. He intervenes and suggests a slightly less lethal plan. Let's not spill his blood. Just toss him into this pit out here in the wilderness. Reuben's secret intention is to come back later and rescue Joseph and return him to their father. Props to Reuben for trying to become the voice of reason, albeit quietly. The brothers agree to this plan, so when Joseph arrives, probably cheerful and oblivious, they ambush him. They strip off that despised ornamental robe and throw Joseph into a dry pit. Joseph is no doubt terrified, pleading from the bottom of the cistern, while his brothers sit down to have a meal. Yeah, you heard that. They actually sit and eat lunch next to the pit. Very cold-hearted. As they're eating, along comes a caravan of Ishmaelite traders on their way down to Egypt, loaded with spices and goods. Sensing an opportunity, Judah pipes up with another idea. Judah, what profit is there if we kill our brother? Let's sell him to these Ishmaelites instead. After all, he's our brother. The brothers agree this is a great solution. They can rid themselves of Joseph without directly shedding blood and make a bit of money on the side. So they haul Joseph out of the pit and sell him to the passing traders for 20 pieces of silver, the going rate for a slave at that time. In one cruel stroke, they've gotten rid of the dreamer, and pocketed some silver. Joseph, bound and dragged behind camels, disappeared with the caravan on the road to Egypt. No doubt, in shock and in despair, and I don't know, mixed feelings. I don't even know if that I was in that situation, I don't even know what to think. I'll be scared probably. Reuben, who apparently wasn't present for the sale, maybe stepped away, go, use a bathroom or something, I don't know, returns to the pit to free Joseph, only to find it empty. Panic and grief-stricken, Reuben tears his clothes and cries. Is that tears? Tears his clothes and cries. The boy is gone. What am I going to do? But the deed is done. The brothers quickly hatch a cover-up. They take Joseph's unique robe, slaughter a goat, and dip the robe in the goat's blood. They bring this tattered, bloodied robe back to their father with feigned innocence. They say, "We found this. See if it's Joseph's robe." Jacob recognizes it immediately and breaks down. "It is my son's robe. Joseph has been devoured by a wild animal, torn to pieces." Jacob is utterly heartbroken. He dons sackcloth, the traditional mourning clothes, and weeps for days. All his sons and daughters try to comfort him, but he refuses to be comforted, saying he will go down to Sheol, the grave, mourning for Joseph. It's a tragic, gut-wrenching scene. The father believes his son is dead, and for a long time, actually. While the guilty sons awkwardly pretend to console him, the chapter ends on this grim note with Jacob, inconsolable. Meanwhile, the narrative slips in one last detail. Down in Egypt, the traders sell Joseph to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials and the captain of the guard. Joseph's journey is far from over. In fact, it's just beginning, even though in a place he never expected. The saga of Joseph and his brothers show how toxic favoritism and envy can shatter a family. And, sadly, unfortunately, favoritism in family and even just everywhere still happens to this day. So, and it is very toxic. And yeah, and my daughter is definitely my favorite, even though she's my only child, so that works for her. Jacob's preferential love for Joseph bred hatred in Joseph's brothers. A caution to parents and families about the pain of favoritism. Joseph, for his part, comes across a bit of immature in how he handled his God-given dreams. Even though his brothers were much, much older than him. They should have known better, that... Anyways, I don't know. Maybe they were just as immature as their younger brother, even though they were older. And that is usually the case, unfortunately, sometimes. But, so those dreams were a glimpse of the destiny God had for him. Despite the cruelty Joseph suffers, there's an underlying message of providence. Us readers get a hint that God is at work even in this betrayal. Joseph being sold to Egypt is, setting the stage for something much bigger that will save lives. A key takeaway is that God can transform even the worst human evil into a part of his redemption plan. In our lives, when we face betrayal or injustice, Joseph's story encourages us that God can ultimately bring good out of it, even if we can't see it in the moment. Alright, fun fact corner. Joseph's famous Technicolor dream coat, the special robe Jacob gave him, is described in Hebrew with a term that has puzzled translators. From NRSVUE, it was called ornamented robe, and you might know it as, a coat of many colors. It may have meant a richly decorated tunic or one with long sleeves. Whatever it was, it symbolizes Jacob's favoritism. So a fun twist, Jacob seems to have bad luck with coats. In this chapter, his brother used his robe to fake his death, and later another cloak of his will be used against him in a false accusation. Like, talk about a wardrobe malfunction with huge consequences. And that is it for chapter 37. Alright, chapter 38. Judah and Tamar, a shocking detour. Just as we're biting our nails over Joseph in Egypt, Genesis throws us a curveball. So chapter 38 shifts away from Joseph entirely to tell a separate, rather scandalous story about Judah. Oh, Judah. I'm not a big fan of him. And then a woman named Tamar. It might feel like an interruption, but this story will have a big implication down the line, and it's quite a tale full of drama, deception, and an unexpected twist of justice. Just take a quick water break. Alright. So here's what happens. Sometime after selling Joseph, Judah leaves his brothers and goes off on his own. One wonders if guilt or family strife prompted this move. Who knows? He settled near an Edomelite friend named Hira. While there, Judah marries the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. We don't get her name, but with her Judah has 3 sons. Which are Onan, and Shelah. Fast forward a bit, Judah finds a wife for his firstborn, This young woman is our key figure, Tamar. Or Tamar. Let me just say Tamar. Tragically, Judah's firstborn, is wicked in the hindsight of... I just got distracted. So, where was I? So, Judah's firstborn, is wicked in the sight of the Lord, and God puts him to death early on. The text doesn't specify Er's wickedness, just that he was judged by God. In the custom of that time, when a man dies childless, it was the duty of the next brother to marry the widow and have a child that would carry on the deceased brother's name. This practice is called levirate marriage. So Judah instructs his second son, Onan, to fulfill this duty with Tamar. Marry your brother's widow and produce offspring in your brother's name. Onan, however, wants no part of raising a child that would legally be considered his brother's. He uses Tamar for sex, but deliberately prevents a pregnancy, essentially ensuring Tamar won't conceive. The Bible candidly describes that he spilled his semen on the ground to avoid giving his brother an heir. This action is also offensive to God, and Onan, too, dies prematurely for his wrongdoing. Now, Tamar has lost 2 husbands in a row, both Judah's son, and still has no child. Judah has 1 son left, young Shelah, and he is hesitant to risk him with this apparently cursed widow, Tamar. Judah tells Tamar to return to her father's house and remain a widow, and wait for Shelah to grow up enough to marry her. Tamar obeys, but Judah has no intention of actually giving Shelah to her, fearing Shelah might die too. Essentially, Judah leaves Tamar in limbo, wearing widow's garments, waiting years in her father's home with no resolution. Time passes. Judah's wife, Shua's daughter, dies, and after Judah mourns, he goes up to Timnah for sheep shearing season, a time of festivities in the sheep breeding world. Tamar hears her father-in-law, Judah, is coming near her town for the festivities. She realizes Judah has no plan to let her marry Shelah now that Shelah is grown. Tamar decides to take matters into her own hands in a bold and risky way. Tamar takes off her widow's garments and disguises herself. She covers her face with a veil and sits by the roadside on the way to Timnah, knowing Judah will pass by. Sure enough, Judah comes along and he sees this veiled woman by the road. He assumes she's a prostitute, specifically a cult prostitute, perhaps probably near pagan shrines at festival times. Approaching her, he propositions her, not realizing he's speaking to his own daughter-in-law. Tamar, still incognito, plays along and asks what he will pay. Judah offers a young goat from his flock, but of course he doesn't have a goat in his pocket at the moment. Tamar shrewdly asks for a pledge to hold until he pays. She requests Judah his signet ring, cord, and staff. These are personal items, kind of like asking for his driver's license and credit card, uniquely identifiable as Judah's. Judah hands them over and sleeps with her, and Tamar becomes pregnant by Judah that night. Afterward, Tamar slips away, returns home, and puts back on her widow's clothes as if nothing happened. Judah later sends his friend with the young goat payment to find the prostitute and retrieve his items. But, of course, no one can find her, and the locals say, no prostitute has been here. Judah, not wanting to look foolish, gives up the search, deciding to let her keep the items to avoid public embarrassment. He doesn't realize the trap that's been set for him. So 3 months later, word comes to Judah. Your daughter-in-law Tamar has acted like a prostitute and now she's pregnant. Judah is furious at the apparent shame brought to his family. Hypocritically forgetting his own misdeed, he orders, bring her out and let her be burned. A severe punishment. It was customary that a woman pledged to the family, as Tamar would be punished for such perceived unfaithfulness. Tamar is brought out to face judgment, but she has receipts. Literally. She sends words to Judah, and one imagines the dramatic scene. Like, I am pregnant by the man who owns these items. See if you recognize whose signet, cord, and staff these are. Then she produces Judah's own ring, cord, and staff. Mic drop moment. Judah instantly recognizes them, and the truth hits him like a ton of bricks. He exclaims, she is more in the right than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah. He publicly acknowledges that Tamar was justified in a sense, because he had shirked his duty to her. Judah admits his fault, and Tamar's life is spared. The text notes that Judah never slept with Tamar again after this. This encounter was a one-time event. In due time, Tamar gives birth and, surprise, it's twins. During the delivery, one baby's hand comes out first, and the midwife ties a crimson thread on it to mark that one as firstborn. But the baby, that baby pulls back, and his brother is actually born first. Because of this breach, literally making a breach in line, they named the firstborn Perez, meaning breach or breaking out. And the second twin with the red thread is named Zerah, related to bright for shining red. These boys, born of this unconventional union, become part of Judah's lineage. In fact, Perez will go on to be an ancestor of King David and even Jesus, showing that God can work through all kinds of messy situations to further the covenant promise. Chapter 38 is a quiet of a detour from Joseph's story, but it serves an important purpose. It shows the transformation beginning in Judah, who would later play a crucial role in Joseph's story, and it preserves the line of Judah, which will lead to the royal line of David. It's also a story where Tamar, a vulnerable woman, uses her wits to claim justice and a future for herself in a world where she had little power. In the end, even Judah recognizes her righteousness compared to his failings. This chapter is a raw look at justice and responsibility. Judah originally wronged Tamar by failing to provide for her as family, leaving her in a hopeless situation. Tamar's drastic action forced Judah to confront his negligence. The moment Judah says, "She's more righteous than I," is a turning point for him. He humbly acknowledges his fault, which marks the beginning of Judah's growth into a more honorable man. We'll see a very changed Judah later in Genesis. For Tamar, though her methods were unconventional, very unconventional, very shady, sneaky, and all that, and not endorsable as a general tactic, her aim was justice within her family right. God ultimately vindicates her, granting her twin sons and place and a place in the covenant lineage. The big takeaway is that God can redeem the darkest, most tangled circumstances. Even when human sexuality, deception, and hypocrisy are in play, God can still bring about good. In this case, the continuation of Judah's line leading to the future redemption. It's also a powerful story about the contrast between Judah's initial hypocrisy and Tamar's bravery. We're reminded that doing the right thing by others, especially the vulnerable, is of utmost importance. And when we fail in that, it's never too late to repent and make it right. That is it for chapter 38. All right, chapter 39. Joseph faces temptation and injustice. Now we return to Joseph's story and pick up the thread in Egypt. Joseph, who arrived in Egypt as a slave, had been sold to a high-ranking Egyptian official named Potiphar. Potiphar. I think I like saying Potiphar instead. The caption in Pharaoh's captain. The captain. So Potiphar is a captain of Pharaoh's guard. Despite all Joseph has been through, we soon learn that the Lord is with Joseph in this foreign land. This chapter is a chapter of highs and lows for Joseph. He rises to a position of great trust only to be knocked down again by a grave injustice. As Joseph starts working in Potiphar's household, his natural abilities and integrity shine. Potiphar notices that everything Joseph touches prospers, seeing that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed. Potiphar promotes Joseph to be his personal attendant and overseer of his entire household. This is a remarkable rise. Joseph, a foreign slave, becomes the manager of the wealthy Egyptian estate. Potiphar trusts Joseph so completely that the only thing Potiphar worries about is what he's going to eat for dinner. The scripture emphasizes that because of Joseph, the Lord blessed Potiphar's house, a fulfillment of the Abrahamic promise that Abraham's descendants would be a blessing to others. For a while, it seems Joseph is finally catching a break, but then enters the antagonist of this chapter, Potiphar's wife. We don't know her, but we do know that Joseph is young, handsome, and well-built. And Potiphar's wife takes notice. She starts making eyes at Joseph and straight up tries to seduce him. Day after day, she urges Joseph, "Lie with me." And Joseph flatly refuses. He tells her, And this shows, his character, that his master trusts him with everything and hasn't withheld anything except Potiphar's wife herself. To betray that trust would be an awful wrong. How then would I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Joseph says, refusing to sleep with her. Notice Joseph's motivation. It's not just loyalty to his boss. It's fundamentally about not sinning against God. And despite her continual pressure, Joseph stands firm, avoiding even being around her when possible. However, persistent, this wife, very persistent. One day she catches Joseph alone in the house. No other servants around. She grabs him by his garment, insisting, "Lie with me." Joseph doesn't, the only sensible thing. He runs for it, leaving his garment in her hands, and he flees outside. This moment must have been quite a scene. Joseph literally peeling out of his coat to escape temptation and an impossible situation. It's a powerful image of resisting temptation by sometimes just running away, literally. But unfortunately for Joseph, leaving that garment behind becomes a big problem. Potiphar's wife, scorned and furious at Joseph's rejection, decides to retaliate with a vicious lie. She calls in the other servants and pretends that Joseph tried to assault her, holding up Joseph's garment as evidence. She claims that Joseph came onto her, and when she screamed, he ran, leaving his cloak behind. She even twists his story to insult her husband for bringing Joseph into the house. "See, my husband brought this Hebrew among to us to insult us." When Potiphar comes home, she repeats the fabricated story, showing Joseph's garment and accusing him of attempted rape. Potiphar is outraged, understandably, given what he believes, happened. He has no trial, no conversation, he just immediately had Joseph thrown into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners are confined. It's likely a royal prison, perhaps where politicians or political prisoners were kept, and it might even be under Potiphar's jurisdiction, since he's captain of the guard. Regardless, Joseph's golden favor has evaporated in an instant. He's gone from the head of the, household to an accused criminal in a dungeon, all due to a lie. Talk about whiplash. Yet, even in prison, Joseph is not alone. The scripture repeats that the Lord is with Joseph. God shows him steadfast love and grants him favor in the eyes of the chief jailer. Before long, the jailer sees Joseph's reliability and basically puts him in charge of all the prisoners and the daily activities in the prison. Just like in Potiphar's house, Joseph rises to a position of trust. The jailer doesn't bother checking on anything Joseph is responsible for because it's clear that God is making Joseph succeed even behind bars. He is just so blessed, despite, being in prison now. Joseph can't be kept down for long. God, his God-given qualities shine through even in the darkest place. So chapter 39 ends with Joseph unjustly imprisoned, but still under God's favor, running the prison from the inside, one might say. It's a testament to Joseph's unwavering integrity. He did everything right, yet suffered for it. But the stage is being set for an even greater turn of events, and we'll see in the next chapter. So, Joseph's experience in this chapter teaches us a powerful lesson. Doing the right thing isn't always rewarded immediately and can even lead to suffering, but it's still right. Joseph resolutely resists sexual temptation and honors both God and his master, yet he gets falsely accused and punished for something he didn't do. This must have been immensely discouraging. Still, Joseph didn't waver in his faith. Even in prison, he worked diligently and maintained his integrity, and God's favor followed him. Sometimes we might face situations where doing the ethical or godly thing costs us. Maybe we lose a job opportunity for being honest, or we face ridicule for our beliefs. Joseph's story reassures us that God has not abandoned us in those moments. Injustice might prevail for a time, as it did for Joseph, but God's presence and purpose remain. My daughter is having an argument with her Alexa. Anyway, so like I said, injustice might prevail for a time, but God's presence and purpose remains. Joseph's humiliation in this chapter is actually setting the stage for the exaltation later. For now, he has to wait and trust. The takeaway is that hold on to your integrity and faith, even when you suffer unjustly. God sees and will, in His time, lift you up. Okay. Do we have time? Okay, one more chapter. Okay, let's go on to our fun fact corner. As mentioned, Joseph has a knack for losing his coats in awkward ways. In chapter 37, his brothers took his multicolored robe. Here in this chapter, he leaves his cloak in the hands of Potiphar's wife. Both garments were used as false evidence, one to fake Joseph's death, another to fake a crime. It's a literary detail that highlights Joseph's misfortunes. It also is interesting. The title Captain of the Guard, Potiphar's wife, likely means he was in charge of executions in prisons. So Joseph's boss was basically the chief of police or prisons. No wonder Joseph ends up in, the real jail so swiftly. That is it for chapter 39. All right, chapter 40, Dreams in Prison, Cupbearer and Baker. Joseph's story continues in chapter 40, and the theme of, dreams resurfaces. This time, it's not Joseph's dreams, but those of others. Even though Joseph is still stuck in prison, God is at work behind the scenes, always aligning events that will eventually lead to Joseph's freedom. This chapter reads like a short episode of Joseph, Prison Edition, featuring two of Pharaoh's officials who end up behind bars with him. So yeah, this prison is most likely the prison for political people or servants of political peoples, something like that. Sometime during Joseph's imprisonment, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker offend the king of Egypt. We're not told what they did. Perhaps a plot, or maybe Pharaoh found a fly in his wine or a hair in his bread. Something so little like that made, royalty really upset at that time. Yeah, silly. Anyways, it didn't really specifically say the reason why, but Pharaoh in his anger has both of these high-ranking servants thrown into the same prison where Joseph is confined. Interestingly, the captain of the guard, that's Potiphar's title, assigns Joseph to attend to these two VIP prisoners. So Joseph, in his role of trusty inmate turned attendant, is taking care of the king's cupbearer and baker. One night, both the cupbearer and the baker each have a dream. Come morning, Joseph notices they both look troubled. Something is clearly weighing on them. He asks, "Why the sad faces?" They respond, "We've each had a dream and there's no one to interpret it." In ancient Egypt, dreams were considered omens, and professional dream interpreters were a thing. Yeah. I wish we still have that this day, and a legit one. I know a lot of people try to be like it, but there's even books like dream interpretation books, but those are not really real. Anyway, so in the prison, these officials have no access to, their magicians or wise men or dream interpreters or whatever. So Joseph's response is full of faith. Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell them to me, please. It's a subtle witness. Joseph knows that his own ability to interpret comes from God, so he's giving credit where it's due. They go ahead and share their dreams with Joseph, hoping for some meaning. The cupbearer, who was basically Pharaoh's wine taster and trusted personal servant, goes first. He says, "In my dream, I saw a vine with 3 branches. It budded, blossomed, and clusters of grapes ripened. I had Pharaoh's cup in my hand, and I took the grapes, pressed them into the cup, and put it in the Pharaoh's hand." Essentially, it's a vivid vineyard scene ending with him serving Pharaoh wine. Joseph, with God's insight, gives an interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift you up, your head up, restore you to your office. You'll be putting Pharaoh's cup in his hand just as you used to. Good news for the cupbearer. Joseph then adds a personal plea. When things go well for you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this place. I was kidnapped from my homeland and I haven't done anything to deserve being in prison. This is one of the few times we see Joseph openly lament his situation. He's basically saying, please help me get justice if you can, because I'm here unfairly. The cupbearer now has every reason to feel hopeful about his future and sympathetic toward Joseph. The chief baker, seeing that the interpretation for the cupbearer was favorable, works up the courage to share his dream, probably hoping for an equally good outcome. Saying, in my dream, there was 3 cake baskets on my head. In the top basket were all sorts of baked goods for Pharaoh, but birds were eating them out of the basket on my head. That's the whole dream, and one can imagine Joseph's face maybe faltering a bit because unfortunately the baker's dream has a dark meaning. Joseph carefully explains, the 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a pole, and birds will eat the flesh from you. That's very grim. Very grim. Like, yikes. Basically, 3 days and the baker will be executed, his body impaled and, left for birds. Not the news the baker was hoping for, but Joseph delivers the truth plainly. Sure enough, 3 days later, it's Pharaoh's birthday and he throws a feast for his servants. That's a pretty good Pharaoh, I must say, if he throws a feast for his servants. In this celebration, Pharaoh decides to make a grand gesture regarding the 2 imprisoned officials. He restores the chief cupbearer to his position and he executes the chief baker, exactly as Joseph had interpreted. One man gets his job back, the other meets a gruesome end. We can imagine Joseph's mixed feelings. On one hand, it's confirmation that God is truly with him, giving him the correct interpretation. On the other hand, his hope now hinges on the cupbearer remembering him as the cupbearer leaves prison to return to the palace. Joseph's heart must have been pounding with expectation that any day now he might be summoned and freed, thanks to the cupbearer's word to Pharaoh. But chapter 40 ends with a somewhat sad, perhaps frustrating note. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. The cupbearer, back in the comfort of Pharaoh's court, moves on, and Joseph's case slips his mind entirely, and so Joseph remains in prison waiting. It's a bit of a cliffhanger. Joseph has shown a divine gift that could be his ticket out, but the one person who could help has forgotten him. Little does Joseph know this delay is part of God's timing. But as a reader or listener, you definitely feel the tension when will Joseph get his break? So Patience and faith in God's timing loom large in this chapter. Joseph does everything right. He faithfully serves others. God delivers the interpretations through Joseph, which comes true to the letter. You would think this is the perfect moment for Joseph to be rewarded and freed. Yet, through no fault of his own, Joseph is forgotten by the very person he helped save. It must have been a crushing disappointment for Jacob, adding to the years of unjust suffering. Many of us can relate to feelings of being overlooked and forgotten after we've helped others or done the right thing. But Joseph's story encourages us to not lose heart. The silence and waiting do not mean God is absent. Rather, God's plan often requires timing we can't see. The cupbearer may have forgotten Joseph, but God had not. There's a bigger picture unfolding that Joseph can't grasp yet. So, this chapter challenges us to trust God faithfully, and even when we face delays and disappointments. It also highlights Joseph's continued reliance on God and his compassionate character even in hardship. Sometimes deliverance doesn't come immediately, but when it does come, we'll often be able to look back and say, now I see what God was doing all along. So hang tight. Joseph, big chances are coming. Not just quite yet though. Alright, fun fact corner. This chapter contains one of the few reference for birthdays in the Bible. Pharaoh's birthday is the occasion for the cupbearer's release and the baker's execution. In ancient Egyptian culture, the pharaoh's birthday could be celebrated with amnesty or judgment, kind of like a king's prerogative day. Also, note the phrase, lift up your head. Joseph used it in both interpretations, positively for the cupbearer. Lift up your head means restore you. And negatively for the baker, lift up your head from you, off with your head. It's a pun in Hebrew that turns grim for the baker. And talk about gallows humor. All right, and that is it. So at the end of chapter 40, Joseph is still stuck in the dungeon feeling forgotten, but we as readers sense that change is on the horizon. How will Joseph get out of prison? What will happen when Pharaoh himself starts having some very strange dreams? And how might Joseph's brothers cross paths with him again? At the end of chapter 40, Joseph is still stuck in the dungeon, feeling forgotten. But we as readers sense that change is on the horizon. How will Joseph get out of prison? What will happen when Pharaoh himself starts having some very strange dreams? And how might Joseph's brothers cross paths with him again? The stage is set for one of the most dramatic turnarounds in the Bible. In the next episode, we'll see Joseph go from prisoner to powerful leader in Egypt, interpret Pharaoh's nightmares, and even come face to face with those brothers who sold him. The tension will be high. The emotion is real. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. And until then, thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I hope these stories and insights spoke to you as deeply as they do to me. Life may not always be fair, but as Joseph and even Tamar show us, faith, integrity, and patience pave the way for God's blessings in the end. If you've joined me in this journey, stay tuned for episode 9, where redemption and reconciliation take center stage. And as always, stay curious. See you in the next episode.